Welcome. This is the Domain Name Law Show. We're here every Tuesday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. There's three hosts to the show. Myself, David Michaels, and Jeff Neuman. My name is Todd Ryan. Jeff is busy today and is not going to make this show, and we have a lot to cover. So, David, we got to take care of it from here. But, David, how are you doing today? What's going on in Toronto area?
It's sunny, cold, and nothing much else is going on.
Well, we have a lot to go over. I wanted to start off, David. People can see what we're going to cover. They can see the cases that we're going to review. These are recent UDRP decisions, and that's a domain dispute. And you can check it out at DNL, as in domain name law, dnlshow.com/outline. And you can see a couple of the news articles that we're going to talk about, and then what cases we're going to review. The first news article really was something that I experienced firsthand, and I saw the article then in Domain Investing, which is Elliot's blog, domaininvesting.com. You can see a link on our outline. But it was basically GoDaddy sending out, if you're a GoDaddy customer, you get renewal notices. Well, they're sending out these renewal notices now that say billing failure. If you don't renew your name, you're going to lose it. There's a few names that each month I'm dropping, so I don't renew them. It gets past the expiration date, and then they send these emails out saying billing failure. And yeah, when I first got one a week or so ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, I was like, yeah, it concerns you because you're thinking, what did they? Is there a credit card issue? What's going on with my billing at GoDaddy? And you want to make sure that anything that you want to renew or any services that you want to renew are in fact being renewed. You don't want any billing failures. They just put this in the subject line to get your attention, so you will consider renewing what names that they're bringing to your attention. Anyway, pretty tricky, and it did get my attention, and then I realized it was just bullshit, and now I've received a few more, and then I see Elliot blogged about it. But David, have you experienced this firsthand? Are you familiar with this bullshit subject line email they're sending out?
I have not noticed it yet.
Yeah.
Let me do a search through my email.
I searched GoDaddy because I searched billing failure and I didn't see it.
This is add a backup payment method to avoid other billing failure. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that happened in January, early January. I didn't even notice.
And yours says, mine, it looks like my most recent one. Save this domain before it's gone on 3/10. And it just says, yeah, you're right, to prevent future cancellations. Oh, no, turn on auto renew. Mine doesn't say anything about issues with the credit card because there's not. I mean, everything's fine. So they're basically just telling you to turn on auto renew. And that's like if you don't have auto renew on, according to my, they're acting like potential billing failure. Just a tricky way to get your attention. I mean, and don't think it's really a nice way to do it. Certainly works. I'd like to speak with someone at GoDaddy. Next time I speak to my premier rep, I'm going to say, are you familiar with this? Attempt to really just grab attention. I don't know if it's trying to scare you or what, but yeah.
Well, it might be deceptive marketing, and it might be actionable by the FTC. So if so, they have some problems. And I think they also have FTC problems with their updated TOC, Terms of Service again, reclassifying everybody as a business customer instead of a consumer or a mix.
Yeah, that was the next article. So basically, David, explain to the crowd and anybody listening to this replay. So GoDaddy has in their terms of service that they consider every customer of theirs a business customer, and they do that I'm just from what I'm reading, they're doing that so they can avoid consumer protection laws. I know here in California, we have a lot of consumer protection laws, and basically if you're an individual or a personal customer, you have more laws at your disposal basically to go after companies who you feel are misrepresenting or whatever the case. So that's why, is that why GoDaddy is putting this in their terms of service, that they consider everyone to be a business customer as opposed to a personal customer?
I think the primary reason is to avoid lawsuits, like the domain name that was purchased at auction and then taken back. Those kind of lawsuits cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. We know that Jeff is involved in one of those right now, and they don't want that anymore. They just want arbitration. So arbitration is a way to short circuit court costs and maybe reduce other expenses associated with that. But they're also going to be selling our data. And I've already been getting phone calls from third parties, even though Whois is blocked, they're already selling the data. So
if you're a
it's a
business
problem.
customer, then they can force arbitration, or explain that to me. Why?
Yeah. So in the US, if you're a business customer, they can force arbitration. Not in Canada. So they're trying to assert it in Canada, but there's already been a Supreme Court case in Canada saying no, that does not cannot apply. That was involving Uber drivers. So yeah, in the US, any business can contract to opt out of litigation and be bound by the arbitration decisions, as long as it's up to a certain standard. Each state sets up that standard.
For those joining us, what we're talking about is a couple GoDaddy pieces of news. One was, they're sending out renewal notices saying, hey, you have a billing failure, and that sort of catches your attention, and it's misleading, obviously. But then there was some posts online. I think Andrew Alleman wrote about it, and posts on X about, do you notice this? And John Berryhill, attorney, here in the space, commented on it, that if you're a individual and you plan on using a domain name just to put up your own personal pictures or to use for family email, be wary and leave GoDaddy, because their terms of service considers you a business, which limits some of your legal rights. Now, I thought there was a message from GoDaddy subsequently to this talk, people talking about, oh, look, GoDaddy changed their terms of service, or this is what the terms of service means. And GoDaddy said, no, we are very open to, or we want to work with entrepreneurs, so we understand a lot of these are really personal. You start off with a personal account, not necessarily a business account. But I'm going to follow up, and I don't know where I was looking for that response or that additional comment by GoDaddy about people questioning this terms of service, but I can't find where I had read something about that. Do you know what I'm talking about, David, where GoDaddy responded to this sort of uproar about, oh no, they're considering everybody a business client, and lawyers in the space are saying, you better move your names from GoDaddy if you have any personal names, because this could certainly affect UDRPs, basically personal names, or sometimes obviously used for personal use, not for business use. So some attorneys were saying, make sure your personal domain names were moved from GoDaddy, and then I thought GoDaddy had a response to it. Do you recall anything?
No, I didn't see that, but I just got an email today saying that these new terms of service will take effect on March 26th. So I think they're going to capture solo entrepreneurs in this business customer definition.
We're going to get more to the bottom of that. And next week when Jeff joins us again, we'll find out. I know he often, for some that I can't mention, often writes terms of service policies for registrars. Terms of service policies for marketplaces and so on. So we'll, and Jeff has recommended to GoDaddy to, be clear on their disclaimers on their park pages to say, hey, we're responsible for these, or we're not responsible, but the company that we do business with is responsible, and in no way are we or the domain owner. But they have put a disclaimer saying they're not responsible, but didn't include the domain owner. But my point is, so Jeff is very familiar with terms of service, and with regards to registrars, registries, marketplaces, and so on. So we're going to look more closely into this, what GoDaddy's terms of service are saying with regards to whether or not you can use your names personally, and if you do, what trouble could that cause you? What legal rights are you foregoing? We have 3 cases
John
today. Yeah,
Barrell
go
had
ahead.
this. Yeah, he had a comment about that specifically. So if you register a name after that date, or keep a domain at GoDaddy after that date, and you register the domain name for personal family purposes, for just for email, for your own personal self, and then you get a UDRP complaint, well, you violated terms of service in the registration agreement, so therefore you register the domain name in bad faith, and therefore you're going to lose your domain name in a UDRP. That's what John Berryhill was implying.
Right. And that could happen. Imagine if you bought your last name, and say I owned my last name, Ryan, which I don't. Well, there's a lot of businesses from Ryan Homes to Ryan Air to Ryan whatever the hell. But if one of those companies came after me and I said, well, that's my personal name, I'm using it for a personal website. What David's saying is if you've done that through GoDaddy, you're violating their terms of service, and now you really don't have a right to the domain name, so you could lose a valuable personal name, a surname. And we see this happens a lot. A lot of people say that's my surname and that's why I want to keep it. Well, are you using your surname? You can use it if you're using it as your surname in a business, and it's business wise, but you don't want to use the defense that it's personal, basically is what we're saying according to GoDaddy's terms of service. So we're going to explore this more, and I'll reach out to John and see if he wants to pop in here sometime and give us his take on it. I know Jeff will have a take, and then when I speak with some of these other lawyers and panelists in this space, I'm going to bring this up and get some feedback on, we've just went along always. Okay, we have these personal names. I have ToddRyan.com. So if somebody comes after me for that name, I better not use a defense that I am using this for personal use. I try to use it for business use, saying here's what podcasts I, am hosting and so on. But the point is, we didn't know this whole time. We're just walking along. We don't know. You can't have a personal website at GoDaddy. At other registrars, you can. We need to find out how do other registrars handle this in their terms of service, and are they explicit? Are they clear that yes, you can have a personal website? Because it sounds like pretty clear that GoDaddy's not allowing it. So we'll look into this more. It's a pretty big deal, I guess. A lot of people have, even if you have hundreds of names, most of them are domain investors. We have them for resale. We consider it business, and we have them for resale. But there's always a few in your portfolio that you consider, no, that's my name, or that's my dog's name, or that's my, I have some family websites. All right, so thanks for being here. If you want to check out our outline, you can go to dnlshow.com/outline and check out what we're going to cover today. The first case today was one I was hoping Jeff would be here because he was the panelist on the case, and he told me earlier today, unfortunately, I can't make the case, the show today. Let's see, we're going to see who this is, the Village Boy. It has to come up here. We normally, take questions and comments at the end. Today I'm making an exception for the Village Boy, whoever this is. Okay, so before I get into our cases, the Village Boy, welcome to the stage. Are you there? I don't see you, but come off mute.
Welcome, sir.
Hey.
Good day, sir. Welcome. Good day.
What's up? Well, what comment or question do you have?
Okay, sir. Please, buying domain name from auction or drop, which one is the best?
Well, they're both okay. Yeah, from an auction or a drop. Usually an auction is a drop name, an expired name that went to, say you buy it at Drop Catch. It's a drop name. So usually what that means is it expired, and then there was more than one person interested in getting that, put in a drop order for it. So now it's went to auction. If you're the only person that was interested in that name and you placed an order through one of the drop services and you got it with no contest, then that's really just, so you got a drop name. You didn't have to buy it through auction. Now, saying both of those things, sometimes if no one puts in a drop order, then it's just going to expire and go back into the available float or the available name system, and then you can just register it, of course. And then I'll finally say about auctions is sometimes there are personal auctions, meaning you may not be buying an expired name. It may be my name and I've put it in that auction, like at Drop Catch. You're allowed to personal, I mean, individuals are allowed to auction off their names, individuals or companies. And so it's not an expired name, it's coming from a private portfolio. But with regards to buying a name on the drop or via auction, they're both,
Okay,
just
okay.
normal.
Please,
Yeah.
is your DM open so that after the meeting, maybe I can ask some kind of questions in your DM because I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, that's
Jeez.
for a Thursday's show. You have a Thursday show with Todd um,
Yeah, I was going to say,
and Josh.
thanks, David. On Thursday, you can always go to dnlshow.com and you'll see where you can reach out with questions. Okay, so you can do it here on the law show. We try to keep it to the legal
Okay,
questions.
okay,
On Thursday, we do a show called the DNX show. It's solely about domain investing, and we go for 2 hours. We answer the questions right there. So what I'd recommend is write your questions down. Come there on Thursday, which is 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. We do it right here on X, just like this. You can check it out on my timeline. And then Josh and I, and then some of the other experts here, and even in this room,
okay,
we'll answer them. And we
okay,
like to do that in front of folks because a lot of people have the
o-
same questions that
okay,
you
sir.
have.
One more question, please. Please, can you get 2 to 3 word letters domain in drop? Can you get them in drop, or you just get them in auction?
Sure, you can get them in drop, and there's some that are available to register, meaning, yeah. So, yes, you can get them in the drop. You can get any names in all methods. You're going to find 3-word domain names that are available to register. You're going to find some that expired that then you're going to be able to register. You're going to find some that expire that you can put in a drop order for, and you'll be the only one that wants it, and you're going to get it. And then you're going to find some that multiple people want, and it'll go to an auction. So always, yes. So you're just talking about what type of domain name. Yeah, 3-word domain names, 3-word .coms. You're going to find available at all avenues, marketplaces, and so on. But thanks for joining. No sweat. Here on this show, we normally talk about some legal news, review some domain disputes.
So
But on Thursday, that's right up your alley.
okay,
It's going to be all about domain
okay,
investing.
you normally do that every Thursday.
Yep, every Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Myself and Josh Reason,
Okay,
expert domain
okay,
investor, but we'd love to
sir.
have you over there, and I'm sure it'll help out the audience who has similar questions to you. But yeah, that's all about domain investing. Thanks for being here.
Okay.
Next, I see Ace joined us. Want to say hi to Ace and see what's up before we get rolling on our cases. What's going on, Ace? Nice to have you.
Todd, buddy, how are the horses? How are the pups?
Yeah, they're good. Matter of fact, the dogs are ready to go right after the show. They need to go. They want to
Yeah.
go outside, and then I'm going to go up to the stables and see what my wife's doing. She's up there taking care of them. But Ace, has everything good?
That's
Am I going
awesome.
to see you Wednesday night?
Awesome, man. What's happening Wednesday?
Wednesday night, there's an LA meetup. D3 is sponsoring it a little. Is sponsoring a dinner. Um,
Rad.
yeah, so it's somewhere in Sherman Oaks. But yeah, so I'll
I'll tap in with you after to
Yeah,
connect on
yeah,
that.
yeah. I'll send you that information. But yeah, that's
Sweet.
an LA
Okay.
meetup Wednesday
That'd
night,
be
tomorrow
perfect.
night. Yep.
And David, as always, great to connect with you guys. See you on the show. Yeah, to make it kind of quick, because I know you guys have limited time, I have a particular domain that has significant utility, but kind of want to avoid any hiccups. I'm hoping you guys can help me digest it, if that's cool.
Shoot. Yeah. What's up?
Okay. So the domain It is Dubai's with an S, .ai. So the Dubai's is not just plural, but it's like a possessive plural. So Dubai's .ai. And so because it's a foreign entity, obviously Dubai, we go there for benefits, et cetera, and so forth. I just wanted to chat with you guys or even plant the seed to talk with you two, because I don't know who better to ask than Todd and David. You know, I want to avoid any hiccups. I don't know if it's a UDRP or ICANN. So,
Well, it's a
Yeah, look for
CCTLD,
trademarks on
David. Yeah,
Dubai.
go ahead.
Yeah, because some countries in the Middle East are very litigious and they believe
hmm
they own their country names. So
hmm
check that out. Check out the trademark registrations and tailor your usage accordingly.
so it would just be for, because it's a city, right? So with the city, it's just, would it be to local laws pertaining to that city? It's not an ICANN or like an internet.
So ICANN doesn't have a problem with that. The
Uh-huh.
USPTO generally will not register a trademark for a city name,
Beautiful.
a geographic name,
Mhm.
but there might be like a UK trademark or a Middle Eastern trademark, and they can, or
No.
even like a Belgium trademark that they might have, and they can assert that. So that's where you have to be careful in a UDRP.
hmm hmm See, because I have Dubai'sAI.com that connects to it. Is that a way to mediate some way, like a buffer at all, or?
I don't know. I have to think about that one for a while. We'll talk offline about that one. It seems like a complicated issue.
Well, if you can help me like brainstorm on it and I can connect with you guys, Todd, I would love to chat more about it with you because I'm here local. But that was kind of something I wanted to ask you guys without taking too much time.
Yeah, we'll think about it and share more. But what Dave was saying is like with the .in domain names.
Mm-hmm.
India, there's a department in their government, let's say, that it controls, so ICANN's not going to get involved and try to sue you for a name or claw back a name or participate in something like that. But the
Mm-hmm.
government might. So what David's saying is, yeah, with the Dubai's.ai, well, that's the extension in Anguilla. I'm not worried about really
Right, right, right,
them
right.
doing, saying anything, but the
Okay.
the government could say we have a trademark for Dubai's, Dubais, and why did you register the name? I mean, basically they could do the
So,
basic thing and file a complaint. I think you have some strong defenses depending on how you plan on using it and what was the intent behind it. But uh, yeah, they went after
so
Paris.com. France did and actually won that case. So
Okay, so here's where it gets kind of cool, and I'm so lucky to have you guys as like buddies. Because what if I was to try and be smooth and say it's actually dub AIs, like DUB AIs, and you guys can just like kick rocks because I have good intentions. You know what I mean? It has a utility. Would that work?
well, the
Or
big
you
Well,
just
you
got to
have to
keep?
go
actually
ahead, David.
use it.
Oh, it has a landing page. It's operational. Everything works.
Yeah. Like for example, FindX could be FinDX type of thing, but you actually have to have usage for it. So have like a landing page that does something, you're starting a business on it, it has to be in
So,
progress.
got it. It sounds like I have to get you guys a beer. We have to hang out and have a drink or two, and chat about it. But appreciate it because I don't know where to start with this thing, but
Yeah, just always keep in mind, and thanks for asking the question, Ace, is
yeah.
what David was talking about is in the UDRP, they want to see what efforts have you made. So you can say, no, I'm a fan site, or no, this is dub AIS. Well, if you show, look at the website, it shows that we consider ourselves dub AIS. I've accepted partnership proposals from other companies, and I have proof of that. Basically, they want to see what have you done. Have you created a product with that name? I mean, basically, whether even software, because there's usually not physical products, right, with AI, but they just want to know. So, what real movements have you made to develop this out in the capacity, or the way you say that you're going to use this name as dub AI? So they don't. What I've learned over the years is, yeah, talk is cheap. They want to see if you say that you're an easy example is like a fan site. Okay, if you say you're a fan of Bruce Springsteen, then what have you done? What type of site do you have set up? Where, tell us about the fan club. Tell us about, really what you've done, not just you've learned about a legal way to use the name. So you say, that's how I'm going to use it. Because I used to do that a lot, thinking, listen, if all these legal ways to use it, that's how I plan on using it, one of these legal ways. And they're like, well, what actions have you taken to use it in one of those ways? Not just, in a UDRP, they absolutely want to see, like I said, work and progress towards, that legal use. But all right, well, thanks, Ace, and I'll send you that info. Maybe see you tomorrow night.
Yeah, because if you go to it, you'll see that it's being used directly for Dubai, right? And that's like the intention behind it. But the curveball is that the talks is special, So use BAM AI to build the whole thing. But if I can connect with you after, really appreciate it, Todd. Thanks, David. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, no sweat, and you're using Dubai in it, so that's a unusual. I mean, so if somebody, and it's not that they would have rights, but with regards to a foreign entity, they can file a lawsuit, and then this is a CCTLD, so I'd want to find similar cases. We'll definitely discuss that offline with you. Let's get
My
to our
man.
cases.
Cool. Cheers, gentlemen.
No sweat. And thanks everybody for listening to the replay. Replays are available here on Spotify, Apple. You can, we're streaming right now on YouTube as well. But of course, replay here on X as well. Well, the first case is a case that Jeff was the panelist on. Gleamer.us, GLEAMER.us. The first thing I'll say about the US extension is when you get when a UDRP is filed against you, you're the domain owner with the .us, you're at a greater risk than if it's a .com. And I say greater risk because with the .us, of course, the complainant has to show they have a trademark, and they have to show that you have no legitimate interest in that name. But on the third prong, they don't have to show that you registered it in bad faith and are using it in bad faith. They only have to show one or the other, that you've registered it in bad faith or you're using it in bad faith. So you might have registered it, with a legitimate reason. We'll say a legal reason, but now that it's being used as a phishing site or something like that, that's enough. So basically, it's like over in Australia, same thing. It's a or instead of an and it's a pretty big deal because it's much easier to prove one or the other when many times, like with the .com, you have to show that it's registered in bad faith and used in bad faith. So that said, the domain, once again, Gleamer, GLEAMER.us. This domain, the complainant in this case was a company, Gleamer SAS, out of France, and it's a medical AI imaging company. Okay, they were represented by a law firm. The respondent in this case is really a very important part of the case because some individual owned the name, but then under the registration it says repossessed by Wild West Domains. And a lot of us in the space know Wild West Domains is a GoDaddy reseller company. So I had still do a reseller account with GoDaddy, and it's really operated by Wild West Domains. That's who handles their reseller accounts. So in this case, the respondent was listed as repossessed by Wild West Domains. And that's important because Jeff, who was the panelist in this case, said he sent a message to the respondent, or basically to saying, and this I was unclear on. I'm going to take a closer look, but he did get the actual registrant who, before it was repossessed by Wild West, the registrant's contact information, and said, can you explain, were you actually the registrant before it was repossessed? Was this name repossessed because of a dispute that was given? I mean, basically, tell us a little bit about your ownership in this name, because this respondent, who didn't respond formally to the complaint, did say, hey, if this complainant wants this name, I'm willing to transfer it to him if we come to some agreed upon settlement. And it was, so he answered informally, and then Jeff was like, but you're not even named as the registrant. It looks like it's repossessed by Wild West Domains. So he tried to, clear up some confusion, and the respondent then didn't respond anymore. Of course, the complainant was saying a lot about the use of this domain and why it was being used in bad faith. I'm going to throw it to you, David. Tell us, what was the complainant's position here, and we'll just take it from there. What was the complainant's position, and then go through to the decision.
Yeah, so the complainant said that the domain was registered and used in bad faith, that it was registered on November 29th, 2025, and it was used for phishing, sending requests, like trying to get people to get work for Gleamer AI, and that they're going to have US operations, and maybe there's some advanced fee fraud or whatever. But Jeff also mentioned there were some botnets on there, and this was all on GoDaddy hosting. But here's the thing, I looked up the DNS history on this domain name. So it was with one set of DNS servers for the first 8 days until the end of November last year. And the MX records during those 8 days were to Zoho. Now, Zoho offers a free email service, like a low tier service. I think it's only 1 megabyte of email, but it's enough for a scammer to use and sending out phishing emails. And I think that's what happened. And there's another thing here. Why did GoDaddy repossess it after 8 days and change the DNS and wipe out this MX record? I believe it was probably because they got a chargeback on the payment. Jeff asked asked Wild West Domains to find out who actually was the prior registrant. Well, maybe they didn't know, but they didn't respond either. And if they did know, were they allowed to respond? I think it was probably a stolen credit card using a fake name, because who would want to use a .us with a real name on it with open whois? Because had the complainant checked the whois, and within the first 8 days, they would have seen who was the culprit. But they didn't do that. But later, they filed a police complaint and they filed this UDRP complaint, and they just wanted the domain name. Now, it's a $10 domain name, and GoDaddy didn't respond. It's not worth their time. But here's the problem. What if it was a $1,000 domain like a .inc? Those are premium domain names. Like, you can't get a .inc for less than $1,000. Or it could have been one of those registry premium domains that are like $5,000 or more. And then, so the complainant gets a domain name through UDRP, and they don't have to pay for the first year's registration fee because instead they paid for the UDRP. Like this can set up a manufactured fraudulent way to get registry premium domain names. But here's the other problem. Say you or I sell a name on Afternic on an LTO plan, and the first payment bounces, or we find out that the user is actually using it for phishing operations or other illegal stuff. So we repossess the domain name. But the name is still in GoDaddy's Wild West account, and we don't get a copy of the notice of the UDRP. What happens then? Well, the panelist is going to assume that we're okay with the transfer because there's no response, and that's not good. What Jeff should have done in this case was, since it seems like this was a hand-registered name from day one, and GoDaddy's out $10, they're not interested in responding, and then just say this domain was registered in bad faith and leave it at that. And that would have been an easy decision and order the transfer. But because they imputed the use and registration in bad faith on the current registrant, which was the registrar, well, that's going across like 2 different eras, and that's a bad thing. So that's a bad precedent.
Well, I mean, so for those listening, Gleamer.us was the domain name. A person registered it. For some reason, it was repossessed by Wild West, but it still had the email of that registrant. Well, how we know that? Because the registrant did receive a copy of the UDRP, because they responded. They didn't respond formally, but they just sent an email in and said, "Hey, this name was repossessed, but I'm willing to consent to transferring it to this complainant if we can come to a settlement. Well, that's when Jeff said, hold on, it's showing registrant as possessed by Wild West. So until I get more information, and plus you're sending this just an email saying, on this condition, you're willing to send it back. And the complainant did say, David, and I'm sure Jeff, when he's here next week, will tell us, the complainant did say, you guys can look, this guy, somebody set up a LinkedIn account, and we submitted evidence to show this, set up a LinkedIn account saying they're our company, Gleamer, with this gleamer.us bullshit, and using our logo, but basically they're out there pretending like they're hiring people, or they're doing something impersonating us. So Jeff saw that evidence, and that's how so it's obviously being used in bad faith. The registration date was the end of 2025, so he actually ruled it was registered in bad faith and used in bad faith. He only needed to find one of them. I know your issue is, well, yeah, but he's saying that Wild West registered it in bad faith or used it in bad faith, and you're saying that no, it was actually that former domain owner. So you can either have it one way or the other. You can't use this, you can't use Wild West as the registrant and say they registered it in bad faith when they didn't register. They just repossessed it, and you can't say that they used it in bad faith because they didn't use it at all, right? I mean, you're saying that you just don't want to have a precedent of.
Yeah, that's actually correct. Yeah, you're right. That's a good clarification, because if we repossess it, we don't want to lose our .us domain names because we acted to stop some fraud, or we were actually defrauded because the payment didn't go through, or actually got charged back. So yeah, that's exactly it. So the name should not have been transferred. It's in the hands of GoDaddy as custodian, and it's like, a bank robber is on camera stealing money from a bank, walks in with a gun, takes all the money, and then a cop happens to be walking by. As the robber is walking out with the money, he just grabs the money, and the robber runs. So now he has the money. So now they're going to sue or prosecute the cop for grabbing the money and turning it in. Like, no, it's already safe. You don't go any further. And who responded to that UDRP and asked for a proof settlement? Was that actually GoDaddy's legal department responding, or was that the supposed registrant? I don't think it was a supposed registrant.
Well, I think it came from an email address that wasn't GoDaddy. So yes, Jeff assumed, and we're going to pretty much leave this one here because we'll talk with Jeff when he gets here next week is about this particular case. And I would have just put it on next week if I would have known earlier that he had other obligations. And believe me, he's working on a lot of cases. I know him. And so the reason why I couldn't make it today, but anyway, this case, Gleamer.us, he was the panelist on, and it came from it wasn't GoDaddy, it was from an individual, and then he responded to that individual saying, all right, thanks for reaching out. And I don't know how Jeff put it, but he said, I want to clarify a few things. When did you own the name before it was repossessed? I mean, from what were you doing with it? And had a few other questions for him to clarify, and the person didn't respond. And then, of course, Jeff also asked Wild West for some more information. They didn't respond. I agree with you that it's like with no response. Then the panelist is like, first of all, the complainant filed this complaint, spent money. They, it's not that they should get the name because they spent money, but they've submitted evidence. They have a legitimate claim here. I'm not getting the answers back from Wild West as a company that repossessed it on behalf of the registrant, and I'm not getting clear answers from the registrant. So that was his, I'm assuming his reason for, this name was originally, registered in bad faith. And David, it is unusual. It's not like Wild West is a complete third party to the issue. They repossessed it. They repossess names for DMCA takedowns sometimes. And does that mean now, once it's back in the possession of Wild West, that now a complainant has to file something against WoW. I guess my point is the dynamics of how this works in the domain space when a name is put on hold or taken back by the registrar. That doesn't just save the name. Now the registrar is like, okay, we can sell the name again when only because the complainant should have filed this, say, a week ago or a month ago when it was still in the registrant's name. And I understand. But we'll ask Jeff how he decided this was a transfer. He transferred the name to the complainant because the complainant submitted evidence showing this guy's impersonating us with this domain name. This is cyber squatting, and we want the name. And just because there was a change in registrant, it wasn't like the name was sold to a new person. The name was really just repossessed by the registrar, by Wild West, because of some improper use. So it's not that I want to hear Jeff's explanation, but I think it's fine. I think it's a good decision that they transferred the name, that the registrant didn't slip out of it because it was repossessed by Wild West right before the complainant filed the UDRP. Okay,
Would
but
you say
that's
the same thing if it was a registry premium name that cost $10,000?
you mean
Because
if,
they would have been out the $10,000 if it was a chargeback.
I need to think about, like when you were mentioning about LTOs, and that's a big issue, and we'll address that about LTOs and who's really responsible for answering. Some panelists say it's who benefits from the domain name. They were saying it's the buyer that's responsible, but then if the buyer has only made one or two payments on a large thing, why would the buyer be responsible for answering to a UDRP? Basically getting conflicting opinions on who, and then you got the in between company too, whether it's escrow or GoDaddy or who's really holding the name until the payment's complete. All right, I can't even think straight now. We're going to get on to the next
So
case.
anyway,
Yeah.
John Berryhill says that LTOs through GoDaddy Afternic are a mess whenever there's a UDRP.
Yeah, I mentioned we were going to look at terms of service at the various places that offer LTOs and see what the differences are with GoDaddy's LTO, with escrow.com LTO, with a spaceship LTO. Now with, Adam is going to have an LTO. So need to look, what are the differences? That's a great, topic to bring up in here. So we certainly will do that. And the risks that domain owners face. Once again, we know all the the bullshit. Somebody could get your name and they could do some illegal gambling site or some illegal porn site or something even worse. And who indemnifies who, if at all? Who's responsible? Who's liable? All right, I said a bunch of words there. All right, so Gleamer.us was transferred away from Wild West, away from that person who owned it at one point, who registered it, back, or not back, but to this complainant. So complainant's happy with it. The second case, I like this one because it's a friend who owned it, barracudaai.com, BARRACUDA AI.com, as in the heart song, Barracuda. Okay, we know barracuda's a fish. Sounds like a really tough fish. The complainant in this case, Barracuda Networks. Some people are pretty familiar with this Barracuda Networks because they're a cybersecurity company. I know I was speaking with Nat Cohen. He said, yeah, he knew about the company. So because it had, I guess, was a vendor of his or had done some work with them. A lot of folks, when I hear Barracuda, I didn't know about Barracuda Networks. Of course, we know Barracuda. To me, it's, fish, like an animal, whatever. It's a cool name, So the respondent in this case, Mark Levine, answered himself. He didn't hire a lawyer in this case. And Mark, friend, and he owns about 8,000 names, savvy domain investor. He's really an expert in the publishing business. So shout out to Mark. But he did a fantastic job defending himself in this, even though, a 3-member panel, one of the panelists dissented and said, I would have transferred this name. So I'm giving it away. Mark kept his name, had a great defense, and I don't think the dissenting panelist had a good argument to why he would have transferred it, but we'll get into it. So the name is barracudaai.com. So animal, we'll say animal, with AI.com. And the complainant I mentioned, Barracuda Networks, is a cybersecurity company, and said, hey, so this person registered this name. Bottom line is, we've had a trademark on this thing since 2015. This domain investor, whoever he is, acquired the name, I believe, in 2018. He would have known about us, no doubt, because we're popular. And then they went on further after they knew that he was a domain investor and said, well, it was more the panelists saying he should have known. The dissenting panelist said he should have known about this company. But Mark's defense was basically, he said, I'll concede that it's confusingly similar because their trademark is Barracuda in cybersecurity, and they are offering an AI product even. But Barracuda Barracuda is a dictionary word, and then adding it, with AI is really too. It's not uncommon. He was saying he brought up .db had 180 plus Barracuda domains, and there was 50 plus that had Barracuda plus another word, trademarks. So just basically a lot of usage out there for Barracuda. And he brought up, like I said, he was a long-time domain investor. He's been doing it since 97, has about 8,000 names. And I think what really helped him was saying he registers a lot of keyword plus AI.com domains like mortgages.ai or mortgagesai.com, pantherai.com, penguinsai.com. So bringing that up was important. I'm confident in him getting a positive decision for himself. And he bought Barracuda AI at a public expired auction. He had never contacted this company, Barracuda Networks, to sell it. The domains never went to a parked page. It was only at a for sale lander for $4,995. So he really felt like, as a domain investor, I've done everything. Certainly didn't target anybody. I'm trying to pick up good names. I, make sure there's no PPC links. So I think he had a, really good defense, and that's why he ended up being successful. But there's a little bit more to it. David, share some additional facts or things you noticed about this case, barracudaai.com.
So Mark went out, did all his prior keyword AI sales, and he showed, I think, 5 different prior sales. So he showed his history, and he says he has 8,000 domains, and he registered this domain in 2018, long before AI was, known in the marketplace. Like, sure, there was somebody knew about AI, but Barracuda Networks, I would never associate them with AI services. Actually, I didn't remember what they did because I haven't even gotten an email from them in the last 18 years because I checked my email account and I don't have anything there. So what have they been doing? I don't know. They're just not that popular anymore, but they were probably more popular like 30 years ago when they first came out. At least that's when I knew about them. And you know what? If you Google Barracuda, they're not the only people who rank on page 1. You got the Wikipedia page. You got a taco stand called Barracuda Taco. You even have a restaurant called Barracuda Bistro and Bar. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of companies using the term Barracuda, including Seagate. So maybe there's a Seagate hard drive that uses the term Barracuda, and that is maybe what I actually remember. And that's more likely to have been used as an AI service. So anyways, there's no evidence of targeting with a price of $49.95. If they were targeting Barracuda Networks, they'd have priced it at I don't know, 250,000, $1 million. So that would probably it's a buy it now page. But I don't know how many other Barracuda companies are out there who would actually want to buy it. So that's a different, factor to look into.
Yeah, David, when you said Seagate, that's when I remember Barracuda too. They had a Barracuda drive. I remember I actually got some of these. I got a few of those back when we were editing some movies in the early 2000s. And you're right. That so I bring up my personal bullshit.
Yeah,
So
like
yeah,
right now,
I
Seagate is selling 24 terabyte Barracuda hard drive.
yeah, and so Mark said, and you brought up 4,995. If he would have had this priced at 200,000, they do try to hold that against you. I think he might have been okay in this case because so many other users. But if you guys remember, there was Converse.co, and they said, who can afford to pay 250,000 for this domain name? Only one company, Converse, the shoe company. Because even though it's a word, converse, they just felt like this person was targeting the big company. So it can be held against you. But the panelists in this case said, hey, 4,995. It's right in line with his other domain names and really the open market, which I don't know how much research the panelists did on the open market, but the dissenting panelist. So there was three panelists. Richard Page, I know, was the dissenting panelist. The other panelist, Robert Badgley, was the presiding officer, and Diane Cabell. But so Richard Page dissented and said, this guy has been doing this. He said in his own response, he's been doing it since 1997. He's got 8,000 names. So when he went out to get this name, he certainly knew that there was this company, Barracuda, who, was using that term, and that they were actually developing some AI products for their cybersecurity. So he felt there was some willful blindness on the part of Mark. And it was really, really, that's such a bullshit reason. And I say that because, one, no, the other panelists even mentioned, no, there's no record that this Barracuda was working on AI products, or their association with AI was strong at all. Matter of fact, we don't even know how strong their mark was. Barracuda. How much do people know of Barracuda? And then let alone that we know of this company and we know their interest in developing out AI products within their product line. So it was really a stretch. But basically, there's a lot of panelists like Richard Page, and maybe he's had decisions too where he's transferred, but where they think you guys want to be these, I've talked to some panelists. They think you guys want to be these smart domain investors. Okay, well then you guys have an obligation to do trademark searches beforehand. You guys want to be pros at it. When you guys pick up a portfolio, I've had panelists tell me this. When you pick up a portfolio, if there's a name in there that's a trade, infringes on someone's trademark, then you better go through any portfolios that you buy, every single name, and make sure you're not picking up, because we'll hold this against you too. And basically they're just really, some panelists feel domain investors want to claim to be a professional. Well, then they want to hold you to a higher standard than just the average person who registered a name and didn't know really what they were getting themselves into. What was I thinking about? The obligation of, David, do you believe, how much when you register a domain name now, especially, when you're in a position of having a legal background, they do hold you to a higher standard. That's why one of the reasons I was glad when I didn't graduate from law school. I was like, you can't hold me to a higher standard. I couldn't even finish. I'm legally an idiot. No, so having a legal background, they do hold you to a higher standard and expect you to do some due diligence before you're registering these names. What work do you do? What do you check on a name before you register it? And if you find a lot of trademarks, doesn't that make it more attractive, or is it less attractive for you?
Well, the decision says that just because you're aware of the trademark doesn't mean you're targeting. And if there are a lot of different companies with the same trademark, then I find that more attractive for investment purposes, but less attractive for me to figure out what I'm going to do with that name, because that actually takes hard work to go through each registration and figure out, okay, this one's got, this one's for t-shirts, this one's for AI services, this one is for whatever, professional services. And then if you have 20 of those, you can spend like hours and hours doing that on just one trademark. There's no automated system that'll tell you, oh, you can use this name for X, Y, or Z based on these 20 trademarks. It's just not that simple. But
Boy, that's a
yeah,
product
I
that
don't
would be
do that
easy
for
to
every name
build.
because when someone calls me to do a trademark search, I charge minimum $200. That takes an hour of my time minimum, and sometimes like all day. So I'm not going to do that for every name I register. Like, no way.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
a
worth
good
my
tool,
time.
Dave. So here's what this name can be used for. Basically, here's areas where there's not a registered mark, and then of course, registered marks are really easy, much more easy to find than unregistered marks. But that doesn't mean you can just start using a name because there could be a company that's using it. That's why a comprehensive trademark search is not just checking USPTO. It's really, going through search engines, going through state uh, registration, systems, because you can't just think if it's. I didn't see it in USPTO, or I saw a couple and they were, expired. Anyway, no. Okay, so let me say about that Richard Page finally, and we're going to go on to the next case. He did say the risk of UDRP loss should fall on the domainer, not the brand owner. So that was a big deal. That's a panelist saying when you buy a domain name, I don't care if you spend $10,000 on it, you should expect to lose it via UDRP if you haven't thoroughly checked out, is it, or have you registered a trademark? And like we say, well, that just doesn't, I don't know. I mean, you could, like I said, usually, even what if you register a name and all 46 classes or however many classes are taken? All right, so what can you do with the name? Well, you still have some rights to the name. You may be doing reviews on the software that somebody has a trademark for. Okay, you may be doing, or you may be offering those products in a fair use manner. Of course, like we say, we're not talking court cases, we're talking about UDRPs. In a UDRP, the panelist can say, well, what actions have you taken? We talked about earlier, what actions have you taken to use it in this legitimate fashion, in this bona fide use type of way? And they want to see, work that you've done. But even if all classes are taken, you still have some rights. Okay, but you have to, sort of go in the direction of using those rights, or a panelist can rule against you. But I just thought that was an interesting phrase that he used, that the risk of the UDRP law should fall on the domainer, not the brand owner. And that's just somebody siding with a brand owner. All right, so that name stayed with Mark, barracudaai.com. And if you can find any of these names, animals, fish, pretty cool keyword with AI.com. There's probably still some available to register. And I know at .ai extension, I guess the prices are going up like in a week and a half. So keep that in mind. All right. The next case, got to get out of here. ISTOE.com. I really wanted to talk about this Zember case that Zach Muskovich defended, but we're going to talk about that next week. Zember. This case I added because my wife's from Brazil. She's from Rio de Janeiro. What a beauty. And so I thought, I asked her, I said, you heard about this thing, this Isto Publications? I mean, basically it's a big publisher in Brazil. So the domain, the dispute here is for ISTOE.com. The ISTO publisher out of Brazil is the complainant. They were going after this person, Alexander Slutsky. Sounds like a Saturday Night Live fucking name. Alexander Slutsky was the domain owner. It was registered May 1st, 2002. And apparently, if I remember this, the panelist, did acknowledge that this name was registered in 2002, a long time ago, even though this publication out of Brazil said we've been around longer than that. So even if they registered in 2002, there was a big article about us in the New York Times in 1999. So this person probably knew about us. And it's still, a bad faith registration. And okay, so but there was some issues. Just because you're mentioned in an article, it still doesn't tell us, okay, how popular you were known worldwide. There was a lot of companies mentioned in articles around the world. It doesn't mean that everyone knows about your mark and knows what you do and where you're located. And who knows if the guy read that 1999 New York Times article. I bring it up because the respondent said, he accepted that ISTOE is similar because it's short, it's brandable, and it's you know similar to what they use, because I guess they were using istoe.br, just some bullshit. So it's a similar domain name at one point, but he registered this back in 2002, long before the complainant was, I don't know, even well known here. I'm trying to look at this because he was saying long before the complainant existed, but that's not the case. The complainant did exist before 2002. He did argue that the ISTO magazine, the fame was local to Brazil, and he's in Europe. This respondent was, and doesn't even, he's Russian, Ukrainian speaker, doesn't even speak Portuguese. So it was just like, how am I expect to know this? And I've owned this name 20 some years. So he just said basically it was a lawful domain investment, and he believes he should be able to keep the name. Now I'm going to send it to you, David, and talk about how this is a case where he leased the name via Afternic to a third party who was doing some things with it, and then he eventually ceased the lease. So this is what we were sort of talking about. You lease the name, that person, the lessee, does some things with the name, brings attention from a trademark owner, and then you're, as the lessor, you're the one stuck answering the complaint. What comments do you have, or what can you share about this case? Thanks.
Yeah, so the bad faith use was found to be registered in bad faith. So the key issue is, was it registered in 2002? Not Spain, but he has a Russian or a Polish sounding last name, a Slutsky or something like that. So in Polish, I looked it up. Isto means really. In some other Slavic languages, it means same. So it's a dictionary word. And it seems that the complainant is running a truth social out of Brazil in Portuguese, and they're calling it Isto. So that's what I got out of it. And so it's a weak mark, but their registrations are not for the word itself, but the word with some sort of circumflex or something on the E. I don't know what you call that in Portuguese, but they put that little hat, or no, the hat, it's the apostrophe on top of the E, whatever that means. And it's not really a word mark. So that's why the domain was not transferred, because it was an innocent registration. How is he supposed to know about this Brazilian company and target them way back when in 2002? They didn't present any evidence of fame back then.
It was an accent mark right above the E, and those are always disregarded with regards to UDRP. So I mean, like that, and an apostrophe or things like that, because you'll see cases where we'll just see the domain name, and of course there's no accent mark above a letter, but still it's accepted as being confusingly similar by the panelists usually. So basically we're saying they let the complainant have standing, even though their mark may include an apostrophe or an accent mark or something like that. But in this case, the panelists did say, there's no evidence that the respondent acquired the domain or registered in bad faith in 2002. It's more likely that he didn't know about it, and the issue of the domain owner leased this out via Afternic. Apparently, the person that had control of it, the lessee, did put some I don't know, some content on the website that was fraudulent. I don't know what they mean by fraudulent content, but the respondent said, he had no knowledge and didn't benefit from this. And when they did find out about it, he ceased leasing the domain, which I don't know how. I've never seen that where the lessor says, I'm done. How do you contact Afternic and say they're doing something wrong with the name, so I'd like to end this lease? I, need to learn more about that too. I'm sure it's happening. Someone looks at a domain name that they've leased out and they see this is content that is, like I said, fraudulent, or they feel like does damage to the domain. And then what rights does that lessor have to cancel the lease? To learn more about that. But anyway, so the panel ruled in favor of the domain owner and said, we want to deny the complaint. And they also denied any reverse domain name hijacking, because they said the complainant, reasonably believed the respondent acquired the domain in 2025, given the timing of the misuse and the redirect. He saw that lease, and the complainant was like, hey, so this is the person we're going after. When the lease was terminated, it reverted back to that original owner who registered it in 2002. So the panelists did decide, I believe, correctly. Complaint denied. ISTOE.com remains with the respondent. The panelist, let me check. That was Asen Alexiev. But yeah, solo member panelist. But yeah, so these cases get more and more involved. I should have, want to really take a look at these LTOs and find out when are domain investors most at risk, and when they do see something going wrong, or fraudulent content, or what they believe illegal content on a domain they leased out, what options do they have to end a lease? And what options does Afternic, that's the biggest one, how do they let a lessor get out of a lease? Before we end, Dave, do you know anything? Have you ever saw an issue like that where a lessor is unhappy with the lessee and then asks the mediary, the in-between company, to cancel a lease?
I haven't seen that actually happen, but when I do a lease to own agreement, I actually put that in the terms of service, and I retain the right to take back the name. But I haven't seen a third party do
So
that.
you don't
at
offer
GoDaddy
leases through
especially.
Afternic?
I do, but I've never actually gotten one yet, so it's never been a problem.
Yeah, I've had, I think, 6 or 7. A couple of them, one canceled, one's finished, and I got the others. And of course, you just go with their terms of service. I haven't written up here, I want this as an addendum to their terms of service. I'm sure they wouldn't take that or allow that anyway. But yeah, a lot of topics I'm going to lie and say I've written down for next week. Now I'll remember them, because I want to speak with Jeff and follow up on his Gleamer case, and really about these LTO questions. But if anybody, has any topics they'd like for us to bring up in the law show, you can reach out to me, todd@abcma.com. Okay. Or for the DNX show. On Thursdays, Josh and I do the domain investing show. So if there's any topics that you're interested in, I just let people post on my timeline. If you see, like, my post for the domain name law show, you can just post right underneath and say, hey, next week talk about this. But just so you have my email, todd@abcma.com. If you have a topic you want us to bring up here on the law show, let me know. If you have a topic you want to talk about on the DNX show, which is, like I said, nothing's off limits with regards to domain investing there. And for my friends who do join us on Thursdays, it's open discussion. I don't know why people want to come up. Ragu was saying, Todd doesn't let me speak for 2 hours, and then they want to come up the last 5 minutes of the show. So every Thursday, I got things I need to do right after that show, other obligations. So that's why I cut it 5 minutes short. So like I said, I can freshen up. But so please, if you, we'd love the participation. Josh and I like to hear what everyone's thinking, and what they're going through, experiences in domain investing. You don't have to wait until the last 5 minutes to join us on stage. Just raise your hand. So that's the DNX show on Thursdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Of course, we'll be back here next week for the Domain Name Law Show every Tuesday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. It's me, David, and Jeff. You can expect to see all three of us next week. Until then, wherever you're at, have a great rest of the day, rest of the evening. Take care of yourself. Talk with you soon.